Welcome, everyone, to our Wednesday Bible study. We are glad that you are with us this evening. If you're visiting with us and are new to these, we have been studying the book of Philippians, and we have arrived to probably the most popular or the most well-known set of verses in the book, and that's Philippians 4, verses 10 through 13. But we're thankful that you're with us, and hopefully you have your Bible open. And we at the Hickory Knoll Church of Christ, we love each of you. We're thankful that you have a desire to open God's Word, and we want to help you in any way that we can. But tonight we're talking about how to find contentment in a world filled with chaos. I'm in Philippians chapter 4, verse number 10. And Paul says, I rejoice greatly in the Lord, that at last you have renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you have been concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. New King James Version says, Philippians 4, verse 13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. How do you find contentment in your life, knowing this world is filled with chaos, knowing that our own lives are filled with chaos? If there's ever an opportunity to know of all the horrific things going on in the world, you have it 24/7. At any moment, you can get on social media, you can turn on cable news, you can find a lot of things that will result in you feeling discontent, knowing there's so much chaos. And even more on a personal level, there's people in our lives that do things that are very disappointing, are very frustrating, and it results in us having to make a choice of how we handle when life does not go the way that we had hoped, and when people are not doing the things that we want them to do, when this world is not going the way that we had anticipated. It seems like everything is on opposite extremes. And I was talking to a fella yesterday, and he was talking about how he looked forward to the days in which people could, if there's a little difference of an opinion or a little disagreement, that they can sit down over a cup of coffee or lunch and talk it out and figure out a win-win for both sides, and not just be filled with so much chaos and turmoil, and allow that to just fester and fester, in which no one ends up being happy. But contentment in a world filled with chaos. I wrote this statement based on these verses, and I'm going to read it to you and then try to talk some about it. Our contentment is not dependent on what others might do for us. Rather, it's based upon what Christ has already done for us. What has Christ done for us? Well, he came from heaven to earth because he loved us. He went from a lowly, humble servant who had compassion, who for all people, who was willing to heal people, to teach people, and tempted in all walks of life, yet without sin. And he went through persecution and belittling and mocking, and ultimately experienced that crucifixion on the cross because he loved us, and he wants us to be saved. Without the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, there is no hope. There is no contentment. But because of what Jesus has already done for us on the cross, and with his power over death and being able to be resurrected from the grave, we have this opportunity to be dependent upon him, to be content because what he has already done for us. But despite this reality that our contentment should be based on what Christ has already done for us, a lot of times, if we're honest with ourselves, our sense of day-to-day well-being, our sense of happiness and contentment, it's quite largely based upon what others are doing in our lives or what they're not doing. And you've I'm sure have said, as we all have said, if you continue this, it's just gonna make me so angry. Or if such and such does this, I'm gonna be so disappointed. And or if this good thing happens, then I'm gonna be happy and I'm gonna smile. And our day-to-day sense of well-being oftentimes is dependent upon what others are doing or what they might do in the future. But Paul is saying that his contentment is not based upon what anyone else has done or will do, other than what Christ has done for him. And as I'm trying to make sense of what Paul is saying here, he's writing from prison, and one thought you might think, okay, well, maybe the church in Philippi, they could have done a whole lot more for him, and possibly, but evidently there could have been more that was done at some point, but Paul didn't lose any sleep over that, and Paul knew that the Philippians loved him. He knew that the church loved him. He knew they were concerned for him. And he knew that just because they weren't able to help at that particular time did not mean that they didn't love him or that they didn't care for him. And I think that's an important principle for us. It might be a side point to what the overall message is that just because someone's not able to help you at this moment, it doesn't mean that they don't love you. And it doesn't mean they don't care for you and that they're not concerned for you. They may just not have the opportunity to do so. With the fall season rolling around, everybody's this is fundraising time of the year, September through December, right? And whether it's Christian universities, whether it's community organizations, whether it's other types of groups, everybody is trying to raise money. That's what this time of the year is for. And there's a basic understanding in the world of fundraising, and that is no, not right now does not necessarily mean no, not ever, right? And there have been, I'm sure, times in which you've experienced some generosity from others, and other times not so much. And just because you, and we're not just talking about fundraising, but just because a person tells you no right now, or just because a person doesn't do what you want them to do at all times when you say to do it, it doesn't mean that they've stopped loving you. It doesn't mean that they've stopped caring for you. Paul knew the heart of the Philippians, and he knew that when they had the opportunity, they would help them. But he knew that they weren't always able to do everything that they wanted to. But Paul is letting us know that regardless of what those Philippians were able to do or not do, that did not impact his level of contentment. His contentment was not dependent upon the Philippian church. Our contentment is not based upon anyone else and what they could or could not do for us. Rather, it's based upon what Christ has already done for us in trying to help people navigate situations in life and trying to help folks. I often will pose a question, something to, or will say something about, okay, let's think about best case scenario and worst case scenario. What's the absolute best case scenario in the situation? What is the absolute worst case scenario? Sometimes I'm having conversations with folks who may be getting ready for a job interview or some type of other academic type item, and or where, as far as choice to go to what grad school to go to or where to go to college, or and they can't figure out where they want to live, if they want to move away from home or if they want to stay home, or what job to take, and so and they get a lot of anxiety about it, and so okay, so what's the best case scenario, what's the worst case scenario, and try to help them walk them through that. Sometimes people have marriage problems, and they are concerned and realistically so that their marriage may be coming to an end, and that's can be a very difficult situation, and trying to help folks, okay, what's the best case scenario? Well, we reconcile and live happily ever after. What's the worst case scenario? Well, we end up going our separate ways. Thinking about, and these three examples might be a bit different, and it might be a bit drastic, but what about situations in which someone, either you or someone you know, has a chronic health issue and treatment plan not working, the prognosis does not look good, and the reality of death is near, and what's the best case scenario? Well, the medicine will work, the treatment plan will come into place, and everything will be fine and great. Worst case scenario, though, is of course the reality of the potential of death. I don't know what it is that's on your heart and mind right now that's creating some chaos in your life. But whether or not the best case scenario ends up playing out, or whether the worst case scenario ends up playing out in your life, did you know that you can be content either way? And it's not dependent upon anyone or anything else. It's not dependent upon medication. It's not dependent upon treatment planning. It's not dependent upon what our boss decides to do or what our coworkers decide to do. It doesn't matter what. It's not dependent upon what anyone else might say or do. Rather, our contentment is based upon what Christ has already done for us. Philippians 4 verse 13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do best case scenario, I can do worst case scenario. It don't matter. My faith is solid, right? Our faith is there's a foundation through Christ that it doesn't matter what happens to us, we're going to stay content. It doesn't say I can do most things through Christ, I can do some things through Christ, or I can do a few things through Christ. Rather, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I hope all of your best case scenarios play out. I hope your life goes exactly the way that you had dreamed it up that it would. But the reality of a situation is that life is not going to always go the way that we had envisioned. People are not always going to do what we expect them to do, but Christ and what he has already done for us and the promises that he's made for us will be able to help us to stay content in a chaotic world. I hope this has been helpful to you. More next time. Take care and God bless.